5 years ago, we have approached the African Charter, and they make the very landmark ruling that the activities of Shell violated the rights of the Ogoni people. After that, what next? How does it change? How does the government carry that on? How do you enforce that? Put that against maybe what if the European Human Rights Court has taken a decision. Then you see exactly why those institutions, as they are not able to solve the problem. They are not able to scratch, to scratch where it is itching for the ordinary people who are affected by those issues. Now, the diamond and oil mining industries have shown a remarkable ability to weather serious conflicts and even allow some actors to even derive even greater benefits, which are as a result of the weak regulatory and enforcement regimes which might otherwise apply. Where there is intense conflict, the environmental rights of local populations are completely buried by the wave of threats to life, often resulting in refugee populations. While in less intense conflicts, there's a tendency for governments and companies to form close alliances to the detriment of any restraint which may be found in law or proper monitoring of the company's activities. This means that although there are in most cases some laws on the books to deal with matters such as oil, maintenance of equipment and pollution, the rural communities where the companies operate suffer the consequence of being made third parties to their own environment. A classic example is the provision in the Nigerian petroleum regulations that bans oil exploitation activities on land that is in effective cultivation or land that is said to be sacred to the people. But it goes there in a proviso to say, if there's a dispute as to whether the land is sacred or not, it has to be determined by the Minister of Petroleum, who issued the license by itself. So you give by one hand and take by the other. So that has become, the norm in all those sort of circumstances. It was in these were the conditions which informed the decision of the Ogoni people to take their campaign for environmental rights to the international community. By 1990, led by my late colleague Ken Saro-Wiwa, we were able to evolve a political device to draw attention to our plight with the release of the Ogoni Bill of Rights. This document, which sought to convey the views of the Ogoni people on their rights, was presented repeatedly to the Nigerian government and the oil operating company Shell in the period between 1990 and 1993. It was in 1993 that protests against the destruction of farmlands for the construction of new oil pipelines led to Shell's withdrawal from Ogoni area, and an increasingly violent response from the government. The economic imperatives for the government meant that Ogoni resistance was seen as a threat to the government's overwhelming dependence on oil revenues and had to be crushed at all costs, which culminated in the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa. I think that is what most people know about. But again, as I said, I could have been also part of that history because I was the second accused in that trial. And I always believe that the only reason perhaps that they spared my life in that trial was probably because the pressure from local and international sources made them feel that every person should not be killed. And I will say that I was a beneficiary of that sort of weird justice. Now, the Ogoni experience offers some clear warnings when considering environmental rights in the context of natural resource exploitation. One lesson which is pretty clear is that the financial interest for countries with these vital natural resources can quickly override the rights of local people to an adequate environment with devastating consequences. Once the people are expressed that, look, this is where you are going to get your money, that is the only thing that the countries will look for. And the interest of the local people becomes secondary. A second lesson is how quickly civil and political rights can be eroded where there are strong financial incentives involved in environmental disputes. The 10th lesson is that the centrality of the question of an adequate environment can quickly be overwhelmed when there are associated abuses of civil and political rights. This is one of the reasons that we have heard relatively little about the environmental consequences of diamond, oil, gold, etc. in conflict-torn parts of Central and West Africa. In fact, the shift in attention was particularly strong in our own case, where international attention only fully swung onto our case as a result of the killings and the executions. Most times people ask me, what is MOSOP still alive? And I ask, what did you hear last of MOSOP? We heard that someone, Ken Sanwiwa, was executed. So that is the issue that people will hear. The environmental underpinnings of that struggle becomes lost because it's like it goes in a circle. People contest because our environment, which is our life being, is being threatened. As a result, governments who believe they are getting so much and the oil companies are making so much profit repress, and then there is associated civil rights violations. And because your human rights are violated, that's the one that people are going to hear. That's what grabs the headlines. That's what people will hear. People have been killed. In Sudan, so people have been killed. In all this, there's a cry for justice that is buried. And once that cry for the environment is always overshadowed by other things that has been happening. And I think that is the most important lesson which has to be learned in all these areas. But all this now, let's talk about the Pan-Africanism for the next. What is the approach that we should take? I do not pretend, like others have said, to be an expert in all this. But like someone who is walking on the ground, while the operating companies operate beyond the national boundaries and borders and replicate actions from country to country, neither our governments nor peoples share experiences and strategies on natural resources management and environmental protection. Set against this, the aspiration of Pan-Africanism must be looked at in a realistic fashion as well as an aspirational one. Without sounding pessimistic, I think we have to look realistically about what I think is on the ground. A realistic talk of Pan-Africanism must take into account the fact that in our continent, countries, or even immediate ethnic neighbors, even when they are the same, separated by this thing, are often suspicious, competitive, or downright violent towards one another. This is especially perplexing even within countries, say, like Nigeria, which are often comprised of a whole host of minorities who could be much stronger if they could act effectively together. But the suspicion that they have for each other dissipates energy and it's not there. So in my view, as a first step, we must acknowledge the importance for our many indigenous and minority groups to show greater local cooperation as the very foundation to stronger Pan-African ties. Because if you have not sought your house in order, it's difficult to go the other way. I find it very interesting if you cross the borders between, say, Ghana and Togo, you'll find out that they are the same people separated by that boundary. If you go into Nigeria, you see they are the same Yoruba people who are in the Republic and all that. But as soon as you cross, you will see the tensions between the same people. So I think the first thing we must do within and around this state is unity amongst ourselves. I think we must also consider geography if we must talk about Pan-Africanism, environment, and sustainable development. Our continent is nothing less than huge. It probably takes longer to fly from Accra to South Africa than it does to London. United States, Western Europe, and China can comfortably fit within our single continent. So uniting peoples across such a massive area should be fully recognized for the challenge that it is.